Another detail that I want to add are these access panels. Now I think they're for access to things like checking oil or stuff like that. I don't know exactly, but they are fairly prominent on the real aircraft. So I went ahead and marked these, made these up as if they were going to be on the aircraft that I am modeling. It looks like the left side panel is more of a square, and the right side panel, it appears to be a little more of a rectangle. So for that, what I intend to do, or what I have done so far, is I have laid up a couple of fiberglass parts. These are the same thickness as I used for the cowl, 6 layers of fiberglass, and then I think I used 3/4 ounce for the top layer. This one may have been 2 ounce. But anyway, that will give me the same thickness panel as the cowl. And then what I'll do is cut out the real cowl part here, and then put this in place. So it's been 48 hours for both of these parts, and then I applied some high build primer. Probably won't be able to tell, but high build primer, and that's now been sanded back. And then I have my cut lines up underneath here, and now I want to apply a little bit of a black guide coat and kind of sand that back, see how it's looking. It almost, I don't know if you can see this, but some of that fiberglass kind of is telegraphing through the top layer. Some of that 6 ounce is telegraphing through. So I need to put a black guide coat on, sand it back to see how it's really looking. So I didn't want that black coat to obliterate my cut lines, so I have transferred some tape just to the outer part of the cut line. And this will give me a start for cutting, and then I can sand the shape later. Now, as I expected, some of that 6 ounce cloth weave is showing through. So this is going to require some more work before it's ready. In hindsight, I wish now I had used a layer of 2 ounce cloth on the top instead of the 3/4 ounce layer. I would have had 2 6 ounce layers of cloth, and then one top layer of 2 ounce. And that 2 ounce cloth I have is a much finer weave, and I think it would have done a much better job of preventing the 6 ounce weave from showing through. Trying to solve that problem with the 6 ounce weave showing through to the top, I applied several coats of paint, wet sand in between the coats. That didn't really seem to solve the problem. So it came down to about 2 choices. One, I could apply another layer of fiberglass. The 2 ounce cloth that I have has a real nice fine weave to it, and that would have worked. Or the automotive spot putty, as you can see. I chose the spot putty. Time involved between the 2 methods would have been about the same. Weight difference is pretty negligible with this small piece. So now I'm going to go ahead and pop these off and try to trim them up. I have extended some cut lines out to the cowl, so hopefully I can match up the piece where it needs to fit over top of the cowl. You saw how easily these things popped off because I use Vaseline as a release agent. I've received a comment from someone asking about, does the Vaseline affect the layup any? For me, it doesn't. I mean, I'm using a very thin layer of Vaseline, about as thin as I can make it. It doesn't need to be glopped on. When I put the fiberglass down, the Vaseline doesn't come through the fiberglass weave. If it did, that would be just too much Vaseline. It only takes a little bit, and it does a real nice job, as I've mentioned in other videos, it does a real nice job of keeping that first layer of fiberglass tight to the shape that you want to create. And as long as you just have a thin layer, it doesn't come up through the fiberglass, and it doesn't affect the adhesion of the other layers of fiberglass to that first layer. So for me, Vaseline works very well. you know, if you want to give it a shot, you should. Just remember, a very thin layer. I cut both of these panels a little bit long so that I can move the panel around on the cowl and the shape will kind of help self-locate. So now that I have that, I can remark my actual cut lines to cut this part out. Remember, the idea here, what I want to do is to cut this part out of the cowl and set this part inside the cowl, which to me will look more like a real panel than just have this part sit on top. After using the Dremel to rough out the opening, I used several different kinds of sanding sticks to finish sanding to the line. And these are all fit inside the opening now. Fits pretty nice, almost like a jigsaw puzzle. So now what I want to do is give this a shot of primer to really see how it looks. And then I'm thinking what I want to do. Yeah, this is so snug it's hard to get out. Stand by one. Alright, I finally got it out. What I think I want to do is to add some 5/1000 of an inch styrene so that this sits just slightly proud. I think it'll look better that way. The only issue is you can see that this cowl sits very snugly up against the fuselage. And if I put 5/1000 inch styrene on both sides, I think it's going to cause the lip here to pucker up a little bit. And I don't really want that. So I'm going to have to think on that for a little while. All right, with a little shot of primer, these things are, I think, looking pretty good. I might just glue it in like it is. I might not fool with the 5/1000 styrene. With the paint, they'll probably look even more prominent with the gloss paint job. So let's see, what else can I do to them? I can add some fake hinges on each side, and then these have sort of a, I don't know what you call it, a push type thing you push in and the latch pops up. I think I can add that with some aluminum foil tape. But so far, so good. As mentioned, I thought about adding some 5/1000 styrene, but instead of actually going to the bottom of the cowl, I thought maybe I'd just make a little infill. So I cut a little piece of 5/1000 styrene, and I actually like the way it looks. Let me get this over here in. It makes it stick just, makes the panel stick just slightly proud. Doesn't really want to do it well now because it's not glued in, but I don't know if you can see, maybe with the angle of the sun, you can see that. I actually kind of like the way that looks. It gives it, it'll make it pop just a little bit. And then mentioning the hinges, I've got some 1.5 millimeter, which I think is about 60/1000 of an inch, half round. And I'll just cut in some slots to simulate the hinge barrels and glue this in, and I think that'll work pretty well also. And then to sort of simulate the little individual barrels in the hinge, I'll use this Hypercut Salt 0.1 millimeter thin blade. Very thin, you gotta be real careful with it, bends quite easily. Anyway, I use that to cut in the little, I guess, gaps, you'd call it, between the barrels, hinge barrels and a real hinge. The hinge length is 30 millimeters, which I think is about right. I don't know exactly how long these hinges are supposed to be. I know they don't go quite fully from end to end, so that's kind of what I did. And the gaps, the little slots that I cut in, they are 1/8 of an inch spacing. You know, I probably shouldn't mix up between metric and imperial, but I do. The two panels and their simulated hinges are glued in place. To get these panels glued in, I had to follow kind of a special procedure, if you will. So while the cowl was still on, bolted in place, I removed the panels and the infill that was with them. And then I took an ink pen and I marked the underlying fuselage where the opening in the cowl. And then I pulled the cowl off and I applied packing tape over that marked area on the fuselage. And then I applied candle wax over all of that packing tape. So the packing tape keeps the glue from gluing the cowl to the fuselage, and the wax is there to get these panels to release after I glued them in. So then I put the cowl back on and I snug it all up nice and tight, and then I applied a bead of thick CA around the perimeter of the cutout in the cowl, put the infill piece in, put the panel piece on top, and just kind of held it in place. Now that sort of kind of got it glued into place, but I intentionally wanted a little bit of a gap around my panels. So the panels don't actually, maybe in a couple of spots they might touch the cowl, but they really don't actually touch it for the most part. So that was a little bit on the flimsy side. So to strengthen that, I wanted some backing to the cowl, but I didn't want anything thick. I didn't want this lip of the cowl sticking up. So I just used paper. I took paper and I put it on the inside of the cowl and put some thin CA in, rubbed it with a plastic baggie so it was nice, all and smooth. And that actually did a real nice job. Both of these panels, I mean, they're fairly secure. They're not going to go anywhere, I don't think. I wouldn't do this for, say, a shaker motor like a glow engine or a gas engine. That's probably not strong enough. But for electric power, I feel it is certainly good for that. All right, so then after these were glued in, then I just glued in the simulated hinges, just tacked in three little small drops of CA. And that was good enough to hold these in place. So I think I'm going to call these panels complete. And one little thing, you may have noticed that these panels don't sit perfectly flush with the cowl. Some of the areas sit a little bit higher up than others. I did try to make the part where the simulated hinge is flush, but then other parts of it kind of stick up a little bit. To me, that provides visual interest. It's, if you just had a panel that's perfectly flush with the cowl or the surrounding surface, to me that's kind of boring. And real aircraft, most of their panels like this, I mean, they're getting used all the time, so they get a little bit beat up, a little bit warped. So that's why I intentionally glued mine in the way I did. I'm hoping that underneath paint, they will give some visual interest, something that attracts the eye.